Hello ratbags, it's Jade Plays Games. Welcome to the Access Show on the 3rd of August. Every single day, 5 PM, taking a look at the world of early access games, brand new information and just general game news. Today we are taking a look at 5 games that could be in trouble. These games are followed for development for a long time now, some of them are quite brand new, but either way they're games that may suffer problems or issues that may stop them from coming out, or how or why have they lost their fan base. We're going to be discussing it, we're going to be discussing what they've also been doing. The video isn't there to just crap on these game developers or these games, it's to highlight how much progress has been made and all the good stuff they've been doing in terms of updates. I'll also give you my thoughts and opinions though on where I think they need to go next and what's the likelihood of it maybe possibly ever coming out on other systems or when it might come out in the future. So come with me for the Access Show, let's go. 5 games you need to be worried about. So like I said at the start of the show, the idea of this video isn't just to crap on games, it's really to talk about the progress that these games have made, how they've fared with player counts, what they're like with reviews and where their future lies, what content are they got geared for the future and plans in terms of either coming to console or what they've got working in the pipeline. With the ultimate aim of gaining interest from you guys and whether or not you'd like to see me revisit some of these games, show you some gameplay, show you some of the latest updates. The first one I'm showing you is Dark and Light, probably the safest out of the 5 games and the more likely to succeed, mainly because it's got a very well in vogue publisher, or a publisher that's got lots of money at least anyway. Snail Games are the publisher and the actual makers of this one. They are also the parent company of Wildcard Studios, who made Ark Survival Evolved. They even the same engine code. Literally, there are commands in Dark and Light, or there were when it first launched, that were exactly the same in Ark Survival Evolved. And I'm not just talking about, you know, user commands from Unreal Engine, we're talking about actual commands where you could summon dinosaurs. Admittedly, the commands didn't work, but they were in the game. Dark and Light had a fair amount of hype. It was riding off the back of Ark Survival Evolved's success and it seemed to be taking exactly the same sort of template. Generate lots of hype with lots of trailers, release it on Steam in early access as quick as you can and give it to as many content creators as possible to generate even more buzz. It had a huge number of players playing it originally when it first came out, and although it's only been out a year, Dark and Light is starting to see some cracks. That original hype quickly made way for the fact that the game was a buggy mess. And I'm not talking about the normal sort of bugs you find in an early access game, I'm talking about the game just is barely playable and runnable. And that comes from experience. If you're on any sort of low to medium settings computer system, you're going to have a very hard time running this. That was the case a year ago. I presume they've made significant updates since then, and I'm really hoping they've made lots of optimization fixes. But trawling through the forums, there still seems to be lots of the same old problems limiting this game from being something really good, and instead it's become something that's just a mixed bag. It's got plenty of content, they've updated the game regularly, they've put loads of new content in it, themed content, environmental content, seasonal content, and they've got a brand new DLC coming up which is going to offer a brand new land, new classes, new animals, creatures to tame. It's very much got all the flavours you would expect, what you would want from an open world survival, you know, fantasy game. But very much like Ark Survival Evolved, it seems to have just been chucked together with no real thought about how the game actually runs and how the systems have a knock-on effect on each other. If they really knuckle down on the optimization, if they can really get it running on lower end systems, we've got a good chance of this being successful. And of course, the hype was meant to be coming to console. That's why I was really super excited, because they announced the trailer and showed clips of it at an Xbox ID event. But the thought of this running on an Xbox would be absolutely like a potato trying to power your computer system. It would be terrible. Early access of course is made for these moments. That's what early access is for, to get rid of all the bugs and work out the issues, find out what the communities want, find out what the developers' direction they want to go and adjust and change accordingly. However, your game needs to at least run. You know, that is just the bare basics for your game to start well and to run as many machines as possible, rather than only working on high-end computers. Also the grinds, they did take some of the big systems from Ark Survival Evolved and they wholesale implemented it into Dark and Light. And I don't think a game like that needs that. You know, it is a MMO style game rather than necessarily a survival game. And I think they need to knuckle down on that kind of, you know, aspect of it. So I definitely want to revisit it. There's so much content, and watching these trailers and looking into the updates the guys have done, it really looks exciting what they've done. I just really hope they have optimised it a bit so it can run better. With no roadmap in place in terms of when they expect to release it out of early access, this brand new DLC seems like a good gauge to see how many players are still interested in the game, and maybe they've learned a few things, that's why they're moving to a brand new map or having another map as an available feature of the game. Snail Games are very keen to see their products on as many systems as possible, and obviously they're huge in China, and that's where they'd see a lot of the market playing this game, but they'd probably love to have it on Xbox. So I don't think it's out the realms of possibility of this coming to console, but I wouldn't expect anything very time soon. They certainly need to work on the PC edition a lot more before even thinking about bringing it to an Xbox or a PS4. In terms of the features, it's got PvE, it's got PvP, it's got brand new things being added to it all the time, like these airships were added a little while ago, and that was a really cool feature that I'd like to see expanded on more, and there's lots and lots of things in here. There's definitely no, lack of content. It's certainly held its player base a lot better than other games, but it is starting to dip below the 1,000 players per sort of week status now, and that is not a good look at all. It really needs to maintain lots of players on these online servers, otherwise the game just becomes a graveyard. It's certainly made enough money, sold within around 200 to 500,000 copies, so that is big news for an early access game like this, and of course it will sell even more when it does come out of early access. So there's no worries about funding as far as I can see, unless Snail have really embezzled all that money, but it definitely needs extra promotion and that little bit of a boost that may come from launching it on consoles. The next DLC, when it's announced sometime later on this year, will probably be the best indicator of how far Dark Knight has come, whether the optimizations have really been added in, and what the future holds. I'll definitely show you some gameplay when that update drops. Now, with the popularity of No Man's Sky back in the spotlight and people generally loving the space game, are space games maybe going to get a bit of a boost for this? I really hope so, because it seems that survival space games particularly just aren't very well received, and I don't understand why. I've been trying to think about it, but there's lots of games out there that have just had real problems establishing a foothold on Steam, and you can talk about lots of them, but Osiris New Dawn has probably got the better development out of lots of them games. It's really had a good strong focus on adding core features and responding to player feedback, maybe a little bit too much sometimes. Developers made some wholesale changes very early on in the development and in early access, responding to what players supposedly wanted, and it turns out actually it probably wasn't. It took some adjustments, some tweaks to get that right. Osiris New Dawn have been doing what most games do. They add loads of content, see how much of it works, see how much of it goes with the community, and where it lies in their general plans. Osiris New Dawn is a survival game set in space, and maybe that's the problem with survival games in space. Using your typical pickaxe to go and get resources when you've got ships and spacecraft is a little bit maybe old school, and that's, I don't know, is that a reason why people don't like space survival games? There aren't that many that are successful. Take away something like, Space Engineers, or, I'm trying desperately to think of another space game that's been successful other than maybe No Man's Sky recently, and you will come away with not that many. I really liked Osiris New Dawn when it first launched. I thought it had really loads of potential. The graphics looked great, the world looked great, it had some monsters, it had some creatures in the very early stages, and it had big ambitious plans. Over the last 2 years, and it has been 2 years since I first played this game, it has had increasingly big updates. They've added new features, experimental features, they've added new planets, they've added all sorts of new vehicles and new ways to play the game. But that initial hype died quickly, like many early access games, and the player base for it now is well below the hundreds. There really isn't that many people playing this on a daily basis. And it's got all the hallmarks that I would want from a space game. It's got vehicles that you can customise and build. It's got base building that is really customisable now. After a rocky start with just sort of prefabs, you can now build your bases pretty much exactly however you want. They have well established class systems, so you can choose what class you're going to be, whether a marine or an engineer or a scientist, and it's got all the PvP, PvE elements that you expect with lots of servers like that. What the developers have been focused on in the last few months is setting up something akin to a test branch server to try what they're calling experiences. Now, some of the community has reacted negatively to this, thinking that these experiences are taken away from development of the main game, but these experiences are designed purely to see if features will work in the main game. So they've been releasing them every few weeks, and they're small offshoots. They may not have anything to do with the final game, but in one of the most recent ones you got the chance to control a mech, and you have to do a time trial, and you have to get across a certain area and perform certain tasks in the quickest amount of time using a big massive mech suit. Now that sounds pretty cool to me, but like I said, I can't see why some community members are complaining. It's clearly designed about seeing what's going to be good for the game. Maybe it is the length of time. 2 years in early access, and with a dwindling amount of players playing online, it might be frustrating if you're trying to build communities on these games, or you just want the actual servers to have lots of players. It's probably a real downer if there aren't that many people playing. Osiris New Dawn was another game that got hyped up by announcing trailers for the PS4 and Xbox One and saying that it would be coming to them systems as well. Maybe a little bit too ambitious from developers. Information on that has gone dark, and it's been dark for a long time. There's been no new relevant news about them coming to console, and clearly, although they've made some copies, they've sold quite a few. If they're not continuing to sell copies, that money's probably started to dry up a little bit, so they're probably going to need help from a bigger publisher now. Or they may just be content to only publish on the PC system now they've made their money. Does it matter that players aren't playing your game? I guess that's where you come into the morals of being a game developer. Are you going to make something that you want people to play, or are you going to just make something just to earn a quick buck? I don't think Osiris New Dawn are like that at all. The development team started out really tiny, really small, and they've still only grown slightly, but they are really working hard, and they've been working hard for the longest of time, adding new planets to explore, adding brand new vehicles, and like I said, adding and changing how the game plays based on community feedback has been really strong with the development of this game. But it just can't seem to catch a break. It just hasn't caught that big promotional buzz. I don't know, maybe other developers have been lucky with content creators pushing their game more, and maybe the game just is not original enough. But for me, when I played it, I thought it was good. I thought it stood out from the other space survival games I played. I played things like Planet Nomads, and that was okay, but still a bit ropey. And this was definitely a better version of a space game. I liked the survival elements. I love the fact there was all different types of ships that you could take control. And although the planets are buggy and there's not much to do on some of the other planets, the fact that you could even go and explore the other planets was really interesting to me. Maybe they caught the backlash of No Man's Sky. Believe it or not, they really come out in tandem with that game too. So maybe people looked at No Man's Sky and just went, you know what, I'm done with space games. I ain't buying this crap anymore. Hopefully, if No Man's Sky is on the rise, that will generate more interest in space games, because I'd really like to see Osiris New Dawn succeed. In review terms, the game is not far off from being actually very good. It's mixed currently, and the latest reviews say mixed too. And in terms of players though, it really is dwindling. They're lucky if you get more than a few hundred players on it in the last few weeks. So I really hope from somewhere they can maybe get extra investment to carry on developing the game, or get that extra push to come on console. I think console would love this game, and I think it runs well enough that it would be well received even in an early access phase on Xbox or something like that. So that's my big advice. Osiris, get your asses onto a console. I think the lack of games like this on them systems would really do you a real good justice. Citadels Forged with Fire has a brand new update launching today. The new Ignis update has basically revamped and reworked a lot of the stuff in the game, added full character customization, new crafting spells, as well as all sorts of new features like farming. It really adds more content to the game. Citadels Forged with Fire has been a little bit slow with stuff going on. It definitely hasn't had as much attention to it as something like Dark Knight, which is very similar based. You know, you've got magic, you've got dragons, but Citadels for me was definitely really magic. You know, if you really wanted to be a more grown-up version of Harry Potter, this game seemed to have it in abundance. There is some taming mechanics in the game in terms of being able to go and ride creatures, but it's not nowhere nearly as intensive, and I don't think it's even a survival game where you have to eat lots of food and stuff like that. It's definitely more of an MMO adventure sort of open world game, and I really like the look of it. When it first came out, I actually preferred this to Dark and Light, and it did come out almost within the same sort of 2 or 3 week lifespan as that game too. They have had some missteps along the way. They have been adding new content. They toyed with the idea of a Quidditch style arena event where you could actually play some sort of game with your broomsticks. That did not go down well with the fans of the game that had been playing it. They really didn't think that was a good idea of resources, and they kind of accused the devs of focusing on stuff like that, trying to cash in on some sort of battle royale craze or something like that. I'm not too sure how Quidditch ties into battle royale, but that was definitely some of the criticisms I saw. What Citadels does have going for it is that real attention to magic, and it really feels great, and it looks and runs pretty decent for me as well. Whereas Dark and Light is an absolute beast for systems and just doesn't run very well, and in the end it starts to look a bit ropey because it doesn't run very well. Citadel seems a bit better, a bit simpler, maybe not as detailed a world, but certainly in terms of what you could do and the magic and running around being the type of character that you want it to be, it definitely had some really good features. At the beginning it was lacking, I do believe, a single player mode, and that maybe harmed its chances of being really popular, but I think they've added that now, and there's all different ways to play the game, and it has got all sorts of base building in it and just a real attention to the magic, and that's how it should be if you're making a fantasy game. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of games out there that aren't all just magic and maybe a bit more, based on swords and not just sorcery, but I really like the idea of this one. I like the creatures. There didn't seem way too many creatures added to the game like Dark and Light. It was a good balance of what you come to expect and some really nice features. All three of the games I've mentioned so far have been previewed or featured in some sort of Xbox or PlayStation show, or they've been put on the official channels. So it made everyone believe these games would come, but slowly over time you come to the realisation that maybe that's not necessarily so true, as word on these ports coming over to consoles has been really quiet, and that is no different for Citadels Forged with Fire either. So what has gone wrong? Why aren't people playing this game? Well, maybe it was just a bit of saturation, like I said, with Dark and Light and other games like it, and maybe people just weren't in a mood. The reason I fear for this game even more so is it sold just as many copies, if not same sort of copies as Dark and Light, but it certainly hasn't kept the player base, and it certainly didn't launch with as much hype. We're well below the 100 player count on a daily basis now with this game, so if players aren't on the servers, why are you going to play on this game? What is the point in doing it? What is the point of enjoying any aspects of it if there's no one to play with? I really do hope they can find some way to increase the player counts, because that is what is killing and holding back this game at the moment. And normally when your game is well run and you're adding good content every sort of month or so, that is what's going to keep your game going and keep interest in it. So definitely Citadels has some work to do. But like I said, the update is dropping today, Igniter, so it'll probably be one of the games I'll take a look at in the next week or so and show you guys how much it's come along. Okay, remember when I said at the beginning of the show that this video isn't just to crap on games? Well, maybe I lied. There's one game I'm probably going to crap on more than most, and what I really think was the biggest letdown: Pixark. Now, this one's only been out this year and it is available on Xbox One, which makes it very different from the other games we've already previewed. I like this game, or I like the idea of the game. I hyped it up massively on my channel and I covered it for quite a good few weeks when it launched. However, it was apparent there were some really significant, huge issues. Snail Games made the bold decision to launch it on Steam and Xbox at exactly the same time in early access forms. When you think about combining Ark and Minecraft, it's a sure winner, right? You've got 12 million players, 13 million players who have played Ark, 40, 50 million players that have played Minecraft, if not more. What a good idea to mix the two. But there's just something off about Pixark. It just never really gelled. And although there was lots of good features about it, lots of limitations in technical aspects really held it back. More so though was just the communication from the development team. Now, this game might be still doing okay on Xbox, but it'll be a miracle, because I swear half the people that bought this game ended up refunding it. It's one thing for your game to be a bit buggy in early access, maybe it crashes a lot, maybe there's features that just don't simply work. It's another when your game just won't actually do the job and work and turn up and turn on. And that was the huge problem with Pixark on Xbox One. It just didn't work. Every time, every few moments, people complaining about crashes. You were lucky if you could get the game to start, and that persisted for months. There were huge problems, huge issues, and while PC seemed to be getting all the love and seemed to be working perfectly fine, there was no information for the Xbox fans. Also, bear in mind, the Xbox fans are mostly kids. When you think about consoles, the people that play consoles are a younger generation. They are generally a bit younger. Of course, there's lots of adults that play it. I'm not saying that for 1 second there isn't. But compare it to a PC crowd, there are definitely more young people playing games like these on console than they will be playing on their PCs. And as far as I'm aware, it done some good sales when it launched on Xbox. But you've got to keep people happy, and if you can't keep a young player base informed and make sure that the game at least just even runs, you're probably going to use a lot of goodwill, and that's exactly what's happened with Pixark. They have updated the game since. They've added a few new creatures, but the updates have been a little bit less than you would kind of expect, judging based on its sister sort of product, Ark Survival Evolved, that added a bunch of new dinosaurs every month, a bunch of new features in early access. Pixark is very slow. That might be down to the fact that the developers said it was about 80% complete when they launched it in early access, so the idea that they're going to be changing lots of core features to the game might not necessarily be true. It's just a case of getting it there. More or less the early access period is going to be a very short compared to Ark Survival Evolved, but not at this rate, because the game still has massive issues. Even today, after asking my ratbags to go and try it out in Discord, many of them reported it lots of times crashing on them and they just couldn't do things in the game. It launched without full multiplayer on Xbox. In fact, it took over 3 months to give Xbox support for multiplayer. During that time, development team had said repeatedly it was coming in certain weeks or certain days, and then nothing. No communication about why it wasn't appearing on the days or the weeks it was given. In fact, they stayed silent for over a month, not answering one single question on social media to anyone talking about Pixark on Xbox One, all the while promoting it with PC updates and PC little info videos. So that's probably why it's in trouble, because it launched poorly and it launched badly, but the content started to dry up. Players aren't playing it as much, although it's still got a fairly decent healthy amount of players. But when you compare it to something like Portal Knights, which didn't massively launch with a huge hype, it had half the numbers that Pixark did, but it still managed to maintain a good steady amount of players. It's only in the last few months, 2 years after launching in early access, that it started to lose players on Steam, and of course it's a global phenomenon now almost, that fact it's available on Switch and mobile and Xbox and PS4. Pixark has got some issues. You can see the massive spike and how little it dropped below after that. I'd love to see some Xbox figures, but they're notoriously hard to get hold of. Steam is generally the only way you can really gauge this unless the developer does release some sort of sales figures. But nevertheless, only a few months after release, it's got just as few numbers playing it as Portal Knights, which has been out for 2 years. For me, that really shows what's wrong with the game. It just has a lot of stuff in it, very much like Dark and Light and like Ark Survival Evolved. Lots of content, but short on actually making the game run well and short of having something really substantial behind it. And it is a shame. Out of all the games, it's definitely one of the ones I really want to see succeed, and I really believed in it when I first heard about it and started looking into the game, but it just turned out to be a buggy, horrible mess, with developers looking like they just wanted to cash grab on the popularity of Ark Survival Evolved rather than make a good telling product that loads of people would enjoy. I'd go as far as to say that of all 5 games I'm showing today, avoid this one. All the others, maybe give them another chance, take a look at them, see how progress has been made, but with Pixark I just wouldn't bother yet. Now there are some honourable mentions. The Culling had a huge PR gaffe when it launched the Culling 2. Xaviant, the developers, really had egg on their faces. Probably one of the worst game launches we've seen in such a long time. They even went as far as to say they were going to cancel the Culling 2 and work on the Culling 1. After some initial hype, it's quickly become apparent that hype has died, and the Culling is looking like it's going to go the same way it was going beforehand, a dead game that no one plays. It's got very low numbers at the moment, even only a week after the amount of hype, and even during that hype it only increased to 100 or 2, maybe a couple hundred people playing it on the actual game. And one for the PS4 people, The Forest. The Forest has been out on Steam for ages, it's been out with early access, and it was told it was coming to PS4 this year. We've heard nothing since then. It's been about 5 months since we heard any information at all about The Forest coming to console. No dates, no intros, no nothing showing gameplay, yet developers are still talking about adding lots of VR capabilities to the base game on Steam. So maybe that's their priority, but right now The Forest is really worrying me that we're not getting any information. Out of all the 5 games I'm showing you today, this one's probably the most recent and the one I've sunk the most time in. Memories of Mars was meant to be billed as Rust in space. It's going to have seasons where they implement all sorts of different things each time, and the idea is that you're meant to be gaining flops to upgrade your systems, your armour, your weapons. It's a pretty good concept. It's published by 505 Games, so a really good publisher, and the development team had a really good promotional drive. But none of that mattered. The game has flopped so hard, it's hard to see how it's managing to sustain itself. Maybe initial hype for it, people buying it, I don't know, maybe the publishers are just really intent in believing in the game. But it didn't have nowhere near the spike you would expect from a game that's got lots of promotion behind it and coming from a big publisher and is fairly decently polished. Compared to lots of early access games, it had problems, sure, but it's much better state than a lot of the games I've played in the last 2 years. But Memories of Mars is struggling to even get into double-digit figures at the moment with players on the server. They've just announced Season 2, or Season 2 has just started again, and it's a new add of stuff. They've revamped things, they've added so much. They've added a PvE element. Before that was a big complaint, that was only PvP, but now they've got PvE elements where there are certain zones that are only PvP, where the rest of the time you don't have to worry about your bases being destroyed by other players. They've added new vehicles, added new customizations for your character, they've got new points of interest, they've just basically done lots of good stuff with it in a very short space of time. It only came out like over a month ago. I did give the developers some direct feedback after talking to one of them in Discord, and maybe they've took that on board. It seems like they really know what they need to work on based on obviously all the people that have been writing reviews on Steam and giving them Discord feedback and stuff like that. Memory Mars is pretty good. Maybe it's just a bit too generic, maybe it's just a bit too similar to other games. The concept of running around taking on these weird spider-like creatures and getting flops from them, which is like the currency, is a big part of the game. I did feel it was a bit grindy, and trying to get yourself to a certain point took a lot of time and a lot of effort and not for much reward. The weapons can be a little bit too generic as well. There's nothing too space agey here, but again I thought that might appeal to some people who didn't necessarily want to be shooting lasers at other players. I really like the idea of PvP in space, like a Rust game in space where you're taking on players and destroying their bases, but I could see why some people didn't. They've even implemented private servers, so there should be no real reason why this game is flopping as hard as it is. It's really hard to quantify. I'm probably going to have to do more looking into it about why. I definitely want to do a video on its own talking about it, encapsulating what Season 1 was, encapsulating where Season 2 is going, and I definitely want to put some time and effort into Season 2 before I talk about it much further. But definitely its plans for the future look pretty good in terms of what they're going to add. I just really worry they're not going to get a chance, because with so few players playing the game, so few players actually bought the game, where are they going to keep the money invested? The publisher may be a good publisher, but unless they've got like an unlimited checkbook, there's going to be no point supporting the game if it can't get a player base. I would love this on console. I think this would sell like hotcakes if they could get this on Xbox One and a PS4, but right now on Steam it is barely bringing in any players whatsoever. So the key to success to keep your game relevant is keep updates coming, make progress in keeping your game stable if it's in an early access state, and make sure you engage with your community and keeping them informed of every step of the way. It wouldn't hurt to make sure that developers are always doing some sort of live streams or weekly talks and dev blogs. It really does keep the communities alive and people wanting to back the game. But also make sure your market for your game is there. Make sure you've done your research and that players are going to warm to it. Also, look at your target audience. Would you be better off focusing on another system rather than trying to get through a congested market like Steam? It certainly is the case that a lot of these games, I really do believe, if they could get the investment to port it, even in a bad state as it might be already, onto a console, it really could help the games in the long run. So there we go. What do you think about that? What are the games that you've played or we've seen from other content creators are most in danger of maybe not succeeding and coming out of early access, or just not performing very well? Let me know in the comment section down below which ones you've played and what ones you do want to see succeed. Which one out of them 5 games you'd like to see me cover more on my channel and take a look at some of the updates they've been working on in the last few months. I am Jade Plays Games. This has been the Access Show, Monday to Friday, every single day, 5 PM, a brand new Access Show in this format, giving you news, info, opinion, all about early access games, brand new games and game news information. I'm Jade Plays Games. Please don't forget to like, and I'll see you rat bags for another one very soon. Bye bye.